I just love sharing my story with people because, I don't know, my story is really a God story. In my wildest dreams, I never would have written a script for my life that has played out today like it has. It had to have been God's plan. He closed doors, opened doors in incredible ways, and I just walked through them. That's all. I just walked through the doors and followed his leading. And God has been using our testimony to help so many people literally around the world. When we walk through the deep valleys, Jesus just changes us forever. And God uses those difficulties for his glory. So it's all good. Perhaps some of the people watching this video will relate to this story. These are really stressful times with the riots, with the viruses, and marriages are very vulnerable right now, probably more than ever. And God has blessed us in a mighty way. And I just pray that, you'll find something in what I say valuable today. And so our story starts, yes, we were facilitators for a Sunday school marriage class called Great Marriage, God's Way. And we were called to that after something really challenging happened in our own marriage. We were active members of our church, and people saw us as a model couple. We had 3 sons. We went to church. We were active in the church. But what people didn't know is on the inside, we were really broken. And we just didn't know how to communicate very well. Neither of us would face conflict. And we just kind of swept things under the rug until one day, actually in the 43rd year of our marriage, everything kind of blew up. And Steve asked if we could be separated. And, it was tough. It was really tough. Like I said, we had 3 boys. The 2 of them were gone with families of their own. And our 3rd son, Kevin, is Down syndrome. And so he and I were at home alone. Nobody starts into a marriage planning on it breaking. Nobody starts saying, eventually this is not going to last. But if you don't work at it day by day, work at it really hard, things just kind of slowly unravel, and you're unaware of what's happening over time until your relationships just take separate paths. We think that, in looking back, that our separation was really God's way of saying, I have a plan for you, but I need to separate you in order to grow you, because we were both very immature in our lives. And we felt that, God was saying, I can't fix you if you stay in a broken relationship. I need to separate you for a while. I was seeing a Christian counselor, and she helped me realize that I needed to change. I was a victim. I needed to change and become a person that was mature in my own right. I had never lived alone. I went right from my parents' house to college, and then Steve and I were married right after college. So I always knew who Mrs. Steve Lucas was, but I really never knew who Jan was. But I was about to find out. I was trained as a teacher, but I never taught in a school. Steve supported me as being a stay-at-home mom, and I enjoyed that role and never worked. But eventually, when he went to work and I stayed home, and our interests just started to separate, and we weren't able to really listen to one another. when he would come home and need someone to listen to him, I was not intellectually or emotionally present with him. I was more interested in what I was doing and more interested in telling him what my interests were, and his needs were not being met in that way. Um, so eventually he said that he wanted to be separated. Um, I can't tell my story either without bringing Kevin into the picture, because Kevin, he's our third son, is Down syndrome, but he is a crucial part of this story. He idolized his dad, and when his dad left, it was devastating for him. But he knows and he understood what was happening. And when I would tell him things, he was able to understand that, because he's a very perceptive person in his own right. And he's a man of prayer. He is a man of prayer. And he knew that he didn't have the power to fix a situation, but he knew who did. And he just prayed and prayed for his dad to come back. And in fact, everybody that he met at church or anybody on the street or wherever we were, if they stood still long enough, he would say, "Would you pray for my dad to come back?" And, people that we didn't even know were praying, or maybe they weren't praying, I don't know. But after a while, no one really believed that the prayer was working. But when Steve did return, there were 2,000 people in our church that were very, very amazed that the prayers were answered. And I think it changed the prayer life of the church. And after Steve came back, Kevin began praying, asking prayer for his brothers to forgive his dad, their dad. And, so people said, well, your first prayer was answered, so we'll pray for that too. And sure enough, in a year, our family was completely reconciled to a normal family again. And it was just such a blessing. During the years that Steve was gone, he lived nearby, and we stayed in really close communication almost every day. And he would come and do the bills for me, and he never just left me without any need, what I needed. And so on the first summer that he was away, I love to work with my hands. Mm-hmm. So I just had a thought that I wanted to build a harp.
Oh.
And so my sister knew of a place in Minnesota that had harp kits. And it just so happened that I had tickets to visit our son in Minneapolis the next month. And so I asked him where this place was, and he said it's like 30 minutes from my house. So of course I went to the factory. I fell in love with harps. I had never really played one. I didn't know how to play one. I didn't intend on learning, but I thought it would be a nice conversation piece sitting next to the piano. And that was my only hope. But God had other plans. He definitely opened those doors. And I just, on faith, walked through. He led me to an organization called Bedside Harp. And it was through Bible Study Fellowship. A lady there knew of someone who was taking classes at Valley Hospital in Ridgewood. Mm-hmm. And so I signed up because I thought, oh, maybe I could learn how to play. And in 3 years, I had earned my certification as a master's, hospital certified master harp therapist. And it was a job. I was hired as a contract harpist for Bedside Harp. And I worked for them for the next 7 years, playing in 4 different hospitals in New Jersey. And, all this while, I was becoming a more self-assured person. I was learning how to do things on my own and not depend on anyone else. And Steve is watching. He's watching me carefully. And, after 3 years, he asked me if I would even consider taking him back. And I had been praying for 3 years that God would reconcile our relationship. So I said, of course, I would. There were things we had to work out because neither of us wanted to go back the way things were. We wanted something new. So, we went to counselors and we worked those out. And while Steve was away, God had been preparing him as well in very different ways because our needs were so different. But God returned Steve as a brand new man on the inside. He was he was absolutely wonderful, and we renewed our vows exactly 3 years after he had left, and we continued to go to see marriage counselors. We read books. We also did a discipleship program called Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, which gave us the tools that we felt we needed to build a healthy marriage. Communication was our biggest problem. And these tools really, really were amazing to help us restore that intimate relationship that we were missing.
Mm-hmm. Communication is such a big marriage breaker. When there's no communication, you have distance in your marriage.
Exactly.
So,
yeah, you just go on. You're on not only on a different page, you're in a totally different book.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you just don't relate, and yeah, these tools brought us back together again.
Do you have the book with you?
Came. Pardon me?
And do you have the book that you used for that nearby?
I do not have it nearby, but I'll mention it a little bit later.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, one more time, and then if anybody wants to get that book, I think it's a really good tool.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I will talk about it a little bit later on.
Mm-hmm.
When difficulty changed, it changed my relationship with Jesus in a deep, deep way. It definitely drew me closer to him than I'd ever been in my entire life. I was just constantly in prayer. I needed him minute by minute sometimes. And he was faithful. He was always present for me. And he revealed himself in amazing ways. Very early on in our separation, I was just grasping for some sort of hope. And I don't recommend that people do this to find answers, but I just took my Bible and I opened it. And wherever it fell open, that I read those pages. And it happened to have fallen open to the book of Philemon, which is a very, very small little book, but my eyes focused on verse 15, where Paul is talking to Philemon, who had let his slave, or actually had told his slave Onesimus to leave his house. And the verse 15 reads, "Perhaps the reason he was separated from you for a little while was that you might have him back forever." That was a very powerful, powerful verse at that time. And it became the verse that I clung to very, very strongly. It was God's promise to me. And every day I would ask God, don't waste these trials. They're hard, but don't waste them. Teach me what you want me to learn. I really want to change, however you need me to change. And every day I would say, what do you want me to learn today? And he was faithful to just let me know different ways that I needed to change my thinking about things and do different things. And um, he was just very, very faithful to me. Um, I just trusted him minute by minute, and I kept opening. I just kept walking through the doors that he opened. Um, and I mentioned before that after 3 years of separation, we renewed our vows, and we just felt that God's plan was taking place. We began to share our testimony to many in different states and even worldwide. There was a conference that we went to where there were pastors from all over the world, and we did share our testimony to them, uh, even to Tanzania with our church missions pastor, and we shared our story with pastors in Mwanza, Tanzania.
Wow.
We've just seen so many marriages helped by our testimony, and they're transformed. One of the great blessings that God has allowed us to see are the couples in our Great Marriages God's Way class at church. We had it for 3 years, and then we moved down to Florida. And we were concerned because we didn't know what would happen to that class, but 6 couples stood up and they said, we'll continue to take that class.
That's
And they
awesome.
have been phenomenal leaders in that
Great.
class. And we just feel blessed to see that legacy continue on and on. And marriages are changed. They are really, really changed. And it's just been one of our greatest blessings. For those that have relational challenges in their marriage, I've been there. I've walked the walk. I've experienced what you're experienced, and I just wanted to share some of the things that I've learned about healthy relationships. And one of them is that 1 Corinthians 13 describes love and commitment. And we know that verse. We've memorized it probably. We've read it a number of times. But what does love really look like? You say love, but what does it look like on an everyday, down in the trenches kind of day? And when you peel back the layers, what does practical love look like? And Steve and I determined that we were not going to make the same mistakes as we had made before in the past. We read, we studied, we attended seminars, we talked to counselors, we worked hard trying to find, a new way of doing things. And I think the key is when we find something that we felt we were lacking, we clung to it and we practiced what we learned. We didn't just go in one ear and out the other. We practiced. There are so many resources out there for marriage help, but I have what I like to call the fabulous 5. And they're the books and the discipleship programs that really made a difference in our lives. And it helped us because now we mentor marriages that are having challenges as well. And we always recommend these books. One of them is by John and Julie Gottman, Gottman, and it's called The 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work. John Gottman is a psychologist as well as a scientist. He has studied marriage on the physiological level, and he's got what he calls a love lab out in Seattle, Washington. And he mentors or measures couples physiologically as well as emotionally. And his book is amazing. He can predict the success or the marriage or the failure of a marriage within the first, I think he said, 2 minutes of conversation. And there's amazing tips in that book. Another one that we like is by Paul David Tripp. It's called What Did You Expect? And it isn't what you expect. It's amazing. It's an amazing book. It's down to earth. And what we basically learned from that is I am a sinner. I married a sinner, and grace needs to be so evident in our lives as far as relating to one another and sacrifice for one another. He just pounds in the phrase, I'm the biggest problem in my marriage. And each of us say that, when the challenge comes up, we just look at each other and smile and say, I'm the biggest problem in our marriage. It just diffuses a lot of things. There's another terrific book by a preacher in New York City named Tim Keller.
Mm-hmm.
A
lot of people know him.
A lot of people know him. He has a great singles ministry as well.
Mm-hmm.
His book is called The Meaning of Marriage. And it's an awesome book. I think what we took away from that book is that we need to sacrifice for each other. We can't always have our own way. And yeah, that's a great read. We've given it to engaged couples that we know because it's full of good of good information. Of course, just a real good book by Gary Chapman. It's called The 5 Love Languages. And that's an old book. It's a very popular book, but each of us has an innate love language, if you will, whether it's receiving gifts or touch. Kevin is definitely touch. He cannot survive without giving hugs and getting hugs. And if you know one another's love language, that's really important. We have found in understanding our mates. The last one is, the author is Pete Scazzero, Scazzero. It's called Emotionally Healthy Relationships. It has tools that are amazing. There's a community temperature reading, which takes 10, 15 minutes a day with your spouse. And you affirm them. You say what you appreciate about them. And if you only said that, who wouldn't want to go out of their house to work knowing that they've been appreciated for something? I mean, your kids, your spouse, everyone loves appreciations. And then your expectations is another one. That's really, if you are angry or upset, it's usually because your expectations haven't been met in a relationship. And that just shows you, different words that you can use to express your expectations so that your spouse knows where you're coming from. And then another tool is incarnational listening. And incarnational listening is listening at the heart level. You're not looking at someone else. You're not working on the computer. You're listening heart to heart with your spouse and really understanding what they're telling you on a feeling level. And those tools were amazing. And we studied it. We studied those tools under the direction of Pete himself and his wife, Jerry, marriage counselors. We've worked with marriage counselors in teaching and monitoring those. Our story uses all of those tools. Jerry Scazzero interviewed us several years ago at an international pastors conference. And we discussed how those tools helped us in our marriage. That interview is on YouTube.
Mhm.
And if you Google Steve and ANDJAN, all run together, Lucas, Lucas, that will come up, and you can hear that interview today.
Mhm.
I happen to like acrostics, so this kind of helps summarize what I've been trying to communicate in the story, and the acrostic is change. We need to change. If things aren't working the way you have, you need to change.
Mhm.
And C, you need to choose to be obedient to the Lord.
Yes.
Scripture says that obedience is better than sacrifice.
Mhm.
H is Him. It's all about God. It's all about His plan. Hang in there when things get tough. He
Mhm.
has a plan for your life. Always remember that God has bigger plans than yours.
Yes.
And never fail to prayerfully ask God to direct your path.
Mhm.
He will. I can tell story after story about that. G is to give God all the credit. Without Him, we can do nothing. And our story is God's story. And we give Him all the credit all the time, because nothing we did could have accomplished what He's done in our life. And the last one, E, is examine your heart. Are you loving God and yourself and others the way God loves you?
Mhm.
Change is hard, but it's worth it when God's in it.
Yes. How beautiful. What a beautiful interview this has been with you. Um, and I remember taking the emotionally healthy woman study with you at
Yep.
Hawthorne Gospel Church.
Mm-hmm.
And it definitely changed my heart. It made me want to pray a different prayer, instead of things being about, oh Lord, change him. Became, oh Lord, change me.
Right. Exactly.
Change my
Exactly.
heart, because I'm the one. And take that. It's Ezekiel. Take that stony heart. Give
Yeah.
me a heart of flesh.
Yeah.
And so at that scripture, I continued to pray that, and things did change in my marriage, and I can say that for sure. So I thank you for that study when you did do it there.
Yeah. We're the only ones that can change us. We can't change anybody else. Only God can.
Yeah,
So we just need to work on our own heart, and everything else will fall in place.
it falls into place. I
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
It's been beautiful. So last question would be for you is, what is your best advice to anyone having difficulty in their marriage, or even just some simple ideas of how to sustain? I know you've gone over so many great things. You've given us book upon book here of testimony, which I will put in the notes when this also goes on YouTube and Facebook. Um, is there the best simple idea that you could say?
I think just to remember that two different people are coming together with two different backgrounds. And hopefully you've married your best friend. And just to keep knowing that you're not in opposition to each other, you're best friends. And to be gracious, just be gracious to one another.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of being lost
Mm-hmm.
today. And seek counsel. Gee, don't wait to seek counsel. Good counsel.
Yes.
Um, if a counselor says they're Gottman certified, that's A1. That's an A1 counselor. Yeah, I would say that, be gracious, take responsibility for your own shortcomings in the marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Speak kindly to one another. Yeah,
And maybe step back a little bit before you say something.
yeah, definitely,
Tame
definitely.
that tongue.
Yeah, that's it. That's
so,
it.
so thank you for all this wonderful, wonderful, wonderful advice that you have given us today. Thank you so much. And
You're very welcome.
I mean, it's just years of experience, and and teaching and mentoring and knowing people's hearts and understanding where your marriage was and where their marriage was going, helped you with God's gift of being able to discern and help these couples. So thank you
Yeah.
for all of those years of helping people get it together.
We feel that one of the reasons we went through that is so that we could help others. You know, God used our challenge so that we could help others in the same challenge. We weren't the only ones
Yeah.
that's happening to. So
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Well, again, last thing I'll say is that, when you get married, you're marrying the person you started out loving them. What happened in between is where you have to step back and bring God into your marriage
absolutely.
so that he can heal it. God heals the marriage, but you
Yeah.
need to seek God first. Put
Yeah.
him in the center.
Yeah. The original fantasies and love, the honeymoon doesn't last forever, that's for sure. And
Absolutely.
when life gets tough, it's easy to accuse and not take responsibility for things. So just be gracious.
Yes, yes. Well, thank you. And of course, one little delight is to hear you play that beautiful harp. This is
Sure.
what I've been, we were waiting for. I don't think the audience knew you were going to do it, but please do. And what will you play?
Sure. I made my own harp, but I'm not going to play it. I'm going to play my therapy harp because it's a little lighter, a little easier. But I just want to leave you with a song, a hymn that is very popular, and I think it says it all. What I was trying to say about grace.